lots more money than that. But what I was trying to say is that those ideas generally fall into this case of they're differential competitive ideas. That would be something I was thinking about. Jack Dorsey, who I have met and know, fantastic entrepreneur, one of the Twitter founders, started Square Up.
Mm-hmm.
Square is an example of something that is a little easier to explain and understand, right? Take credit cards on an iPhone. Very important idea, very obvious in its positive utility, very fundable idea. Probably going to work. Somebody's going to do it. Maybe it's not Jack, maybe he doesn't do quite right, but it's going to be somebody. So if you look at that as an investor, you can really understand the competitive thesis there. But Second Life was just perhaps like Twitter, was just in a totally different category.
So you self-funded it when you started it up, right?
Right, right.
And then how big did it get? How many employees did you have working at Second
Today,
Life?
Second Life's about 250 people. And it was about that size when I left as the CEO, like three years ago now.
How do you recruit talent? How do you build culture? It's a huge team to manage, and you had the idea, right? Have you managed huge teams like that before? Or?
I had not. It was very fun, and I'm still learning. I mean, I have no idea. I mean, for the most part, I think, especially with these projects that are like Second Life, the proper answer to that is I don't really know. I think that applying some of the traditional strategies for talent acquisition, for getting people to come work with you, when you're working on one of those types of projects, is kind of a dicey proposition. I don't think it necessarily works exactly the same way. Again, I think when people understand really well what they're working on, when it's a competitive differentiation thing, we're going to have to work 12 hours a day, and we're going to build a better thing than this other company over here, and that's going to, generate untold riches for us as a team. That's I think you have a different acquisition and recruiting strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And again, then with a project like Second Life, I think that we have less human history and knowledge around how you do that. I can only say that for Second Life, people literally just showed up.
At your door?
Yep. And they were people that were passionate about virtual worlds. They had a particular vision that was maybe not so far off of mine that they wouldn't come, and they just would show up and sort of say, the time has come for me to be employed here now. A lot of the greatest people we had at Linden Lab were literally just people who would, I can just remember multiples of them that would just sort of come in and say, I've been watching this for a long time, and now it's time for me to work here. So I don't think we really knew how to recruit people, but I think the people that were passionate about that kind of idea just managed to kind of come together as if at a concert or something, just would show up to see what was going to happen.
And how did you, so you had teams, right? You divided things into teams. How did you manage, when people showed up, you probably put them through some questions?
Well, I think that there's a management...
Okay. Okay, good.
I think we had some good days as interviewers.
Okay.
We were pretty good. But yes, we did offer conventional employment to people and all that. Although I don't do that now, or we have experimented very successfully with my new company in not doing conventional employment, and there's just an article in Inc. about this, about what we've been doing in that sense, and it's very fascinating. So I don't want to laugh too much at that, because I think there is a place that work is going that's different than the way it works today. But yeah, we at Second Life, I would say it was pretty much like what you'd imagine in Silicon Valley or San Francisco. People came in and interviewed, but I just think that a lot of times we didn't have to really have headhunters running around trying to find them. They would just show up and say, I'm a specialist in this, or I've been thinking about this all my life and I want to work on it.
Talk more about what you're doing now.
Well, I always believed that software development in general had, and taking on Second Life really illustrated this, and let me explain why. Second Life, it turns out, as a software project, just falls into not only does it fall into this kind of crazy uncertain idea where you don't really know whether it's going to work or not until you build it, it also falls into another category that's really important, and sometimes people get this about Second Life, and sometimes they don't because they're less technical, and so they just don't get it. But Second Life falls into the very complicated technology category. I see some you'd nod. Second Life's like an operating system. I always think there's things that are at the scale of an operating system, with all of these little appendages and parts that have to kind of work at the same time. And then there are things that are sort of not that. And I don't know about everybody here, but at least me as an engineer, you just kind of know that. You look at a project and you kind of go, well, this is a pretty linear, understandable thing. We need to move this message from here and put it in this database, and then you need to be able to look at it here. And that's pretty. There's a number of different ways to do that, and you're not going to fail as a company because you failed to build the technology. But something like Second Life, you could potentially fail, or an operating system, or any kind of big, complicated distributed client server system. You could fail if you didn't develop it the right way. So Second Life had that property. As we developed it, I was very struck by the observation that the traditional way that software development and management happened didn't fit very well with the problem that we were trying to solve. We were kind of trying to solve a problem where there were 50 little moving modules all flying in close formation, and we were trying to manage the company. I mean, to a certain extent, we were aggressive about trying not to do this, but we certainly went at it, and a lot of the early employees went at it in the traditional way, which is highly planned, a lot of top-down. So the most creative risk-taking and ingenuity was happening at the top, at me, and then you sort of were delegating with less freedom at each level below that. And when you get to the person who's, for example, writing the code or writing a test, harness or something like that, they have absolutely no decision control about the nature of the project. I mean, I don't know if that's an adequate summary, but that's kind of been the traditional model that we use as human beings to manage and build things when there's more than one of us involved. And I looked at that, and I looked at what we were doing with Second Life, and I said, this is not the most efficient mechanism here, because I'm not delegating freedom of design and decision making kind of rapidly enough through this kind of a pyramid. And so we got really interested in what the alternatives were. So you could look at open source, right? You can say, well, that's an alternative. You have a bunch of people with a kind of a peer interest in a shared asset, and they're all going to basically make changes to it, and there's not really going to be a lot of regulation. They're not making any money doing this, and kind of everything that everybody does is going to get checked in, so it's going to get lumped into the project. So that results in a certain type of software, but it's different than building it from the top down, right?
Right.
And then, so what we did with my new company, which is called Love Machine, which is taken from one of the cultural tools that we built, the name of a tool that we built inside Linden Lab when we were trying to kind of manage differently. It's called the Love Machine, and you can look it up and learn it. We can talk about it later. But the thing we did with the new company when we started it was to say, we're not going to hire anybody to do engineering in a conventional salaried way. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to try to build a system that's kind of a hybrid between something like Elance, like a contracting system, and something that's more like an open source project. And we're going to actually build a new piece of software and a management strategy that falls in between. So what does that mean? It means we are going to essentially break our project up into a whole bunch of little contracted pieces that are much smaller, and this is what we use the technology for, that are much smaller than the traditional contract you might come and do for a company. So if you're working as a contractor on a site like Elance as a developer, you might do a project or be part of a small team that works on a project that's like $10,000 of work over a couple months. Indeed, I think the average contract size on most of these freelancing sites is about $5,000. So what we said was, what if we use technology to make it so easy to negotiate with, get paid, check in, do your code review? What if we use technology to make that so easy that the average contract size would drop down to like $200 and just a few hours of your work? What if we made it possible for you as a new developer, I say new, as a person who'd never seen our code before, to come and help us rewrite a login screen using, say, your lunchtime over a few days, and then we would just pay you with PayPal as soon as you were done. But we would use the kind of open source strategies that people have traditionally used to drive quality. So for example, we would have you do your work in a shared code sandbox where a lot of other people could see what you were doing all the time. So we could entrust you to be pretty aggressive about what you were doing, even as a newbie to our environment, but a lot of other people could see what you were doing and tell you if you were screwing something up. The other thing was, What if we pay somebody else who you don't know a little bit of money to review the code that you're about to check in? If we trust that both of you want to continue to be employed by us and do stuff, can't we just trust you to review each other's work product? Do I even need to look at the code that you're writing as the founder, if I can get that to happen in a distributed way? No. So we built that system, and it's this thing we call the work list. And it's what we've used to do it's probably about $500,000, about $500,000 of software work at an average contract size of about $160 over the last year. And what I'll tell you is that at least for certain types of projects, more kind of ground up prototyping, let's see this work and play with it quickly, I would defend that our speed, quality, fun, cost per screen of new code is strikingly better than the traditional approach. Even now, that's even putting us up against the 3 people in a garage. I'll take them on anytime. We'll wipe them out, because we can call on where you start with a project, 3 people in a garage. They better have all the competencies you need, because those 3 people are going to sit down. What if you want to do SMS and nobody knows anything about SMS on that team of 3? Well, you're done, because that team of 3 already split up the equity of the company, had that tough conversation about who got what, and they are now stuck. They and their egos are now stuck in a room trying to build whatever it was they said they were going to do.
Yeah.
I can do that in a quarter, a fifth of the time, using 25 people who are doing it in their part-time. We always joke about the expression like lots of little parts of more people. It's almost like that's what I don't know if there's a brand there, but it's like what we're trying to build is a company where we're little chunks of people rather than whole people in the way that you would.
That just goes counter to everything we've ever believed in, because usually, you get your tech guy, your developer, and you got to kind of like marry him, and just you're gonna be it's you and him together. You're developing this thing, and if you start hiring a whole bunch of other developers, the lines of code is just going to be hard to keep up, and everybody has their own style of coding, and it's just going to be just a big mess, and people.
So how much? It's exactly the right question, right? So a piece of software, a substantial piece of software built in the manner I just described, how does it compare in terms of, say, code quality and architecture to something that was done in the conventional way? Now, I'll be the first to tell you, and don't believe me, go to the work list, because as I described, all of these projects, including the stuff we're working on right now, including a new project that's kind of a secret project that we're getting ready to launch, they were all built, they're all in an open code base, so you can actually look at the code. And in fact, I would, especially with a room like this, I would very much invite communication afterwards to give me your assessment of what you actually do. I would love to have anybody here that wanted to look at that code and tell me what they thought about it. So is it as high a quality a code as you'd do if you designed it all yourself from the top down? Of course not. It's heterogeneous. It looks more like an open source project, or even a more distributed thing than a traditional open source project, which in some cases has a high degree of sort of architectural leadership of it. So no, the code quality is not as good. But the question I ask you is, are the benefits worth the costs? In other words, is it less scalable, though, the solution that gets built with these people reviewing each other's code? In other words, will it scale to 1 million users worse than that other top-down architected thing? I'd tell you to take a look and see for yourself. So what I think is, yes, there are these sorts of problems that we are naturally afraid of as designers and leaders. But surprisingly, those problems aren't that big compared to the tremendous advantages in speed that you get. You can go back and using the same contract method, and we do this, we write tests that are these little contracts. We rewrite the code, we refactor things to improve code quality using the same strategy. So you can use this same kind of very rapid fire, small piece of strategy to do all the quality improvements. I think there is one thing that is still true, which is you've got to have great people with the right architectural sensibility writing these little contracts. So I'm the person, my partner Ryan, my other co-founder Fred, the 3 of us, Ryan and I in particular, over the longest period of time, have written all these little contracts. You've got to have a sensibility for what you want to get out. It's that garbage in, garbage out type of thing. If you